Well, hey, folks, should the criminal be responsible for the act, or should society be responsible for the circumstances surrounding some people's lives? Some people would call it a blame game, while others say that it truly is a phenomenon that can twist the normal mind and create criminals. Let's look at the Stanford prison experience as we explore this segment on learning situational factors as they relate to criminal behavior. Well, welcome to Profiling Evil in this Season 3, the Academy series. This episode, we're going to be talking about the impact that learning and situational factors have on criminal behavior. Now, if you're one of my university students, welcome back. And to those of you who are from the Profiling Evil channel and your Profiling channel members, thanks so much for being here and thanks for your support. To all of you, whether you're an Academy member or a student, please make sure that you're hitting that like and subscribe button and ringing the bell. Make sure you're sharing us with all your friends and your contacts. And if you are subscribed, you're going to get all of our new notifications as they come out. Well, the Stanford prison experiment was a psychological experiment that was conducted in the summer of 1971. It was designed as a 2-week simulation. The intent was to examine the effects of situational variables on different kinds of behaviors. And the study was led by Stanford University psychology professor Philip Zimbardo. He actually got some money from a Navy grant to conduct this study. They created this gel in the basement of the Stanford University buildings, and there they recreated this whole scenario. Participants were recruited from the local community with an ad in the newspaper offering people $15 a day for the 2-week study. They were looking for male students who wanted to participate in a psychological study on prison life. The volunteers were chosen after some really lengthy assessments of their psychological stability, and then they were randomly assigned roles as either prisoners or prison guards. Now, those who were selected to be prison guards were given uniforms and shaded sunglasses to conceal their identities. They made it really clear, though, this is a guard. They gave him a baton and a uniform, everything. The guard's goal was pretty simple: prevent the criminals, the prisoners, from escaping from the prison. Now, to start the experiment, the prisoners were actually arrested by real police officers, and I'm still amazed that the police department participated in this thing. What was intended, though, to be this 2-week study was canceled after 6 days. That's when things completely fell apart. But when these people were arrested, they were actually taken to jail in handcuffs. They were fingerprinted, booked, strip searched, and placed into their cells. After 5 days, only 5 days of a 2-week intended study, the entire thing was called off because of the psychological abuse that the prisoners were feeling. Now, they were getting that psychological abuse by the people appointed to be guards. And it's interesting because the Stanford professors, their team, was watching the guards and the inmates. And the guards were watching the inmates. And everything became increasingly brutal as they took their role very seriously. Now, the discontinuance of the study actually came when a girlfriend to the lead psychologist came to see what was going on and said, "This is ridiculous." She was absolutely horrified by what she saw, and they brought everything to an end. She was, frankly, just so upset that she called it all off, confronting Zimbardo, who ended the experiment. Now, since then, the study has been referenced and criticized as one of the most unethical psychological experiments in history. There's been a movie made about it. There's links down below to studies on the study itself, a documentary, and a link to the movie if you want to go out and rent it. I found it on Amazon Prime for $3.99. Now, the harm inflicted was inflicted on participants, and it prompted universities worldwide to improve their ethics requirements for human experiments that prevented other people from being harmed in the same way that they believed that these students were harmed. Well, over the course of instruction that we've been going through in Season 3 of the Academy, we've been transitioning from the theory of nature or nurture to examples where a person's environment truly did lead to behavioral shifts that could become criminal. And as you go back and study that, you're going to see some real powerful examples of that. Now, the authors of our textbook, Criminal Behavior, A Psychological Approach, feel that people are not born with a predisposition to violence or this deficient conditionability. Rather, they become that way as a result of their social experiences, their environment. Furthermore, criminal behavior, again, like all behavior, is an individual's way of adapting to the environment that they're placed in. So the question to me continues to come back: is it nurture or nature? Are people more born to be mean, or do life circumstances create these antisocial personality traits and criminal behavior? Now, the Stanford experience was conducted in a 35-foot section of one of the buildings in Stanford's campus, down in the basement. The prison had 2 fabricated walls, and each cell was only measured 6 foot by 9 foot. The rooms remained unlit to the 3 test prisoners who spent their time confined either in their cells or in the yard during that 5-day period of time. The guards, on the other hand, were housed in a separate environment from the prison, and they were allowed to work in teams during these 8-hour shifts that they had. At night, the guards were allowed to leave and go home, sleep in their own beds, recreate, everything else. Now, the researchers held an orientation for the guards the day before this experiment began, and the guards were instructed not to harm the prisoners physically or withhold food or drink from them, but to maintain law and order. Now, they were given wooden batons to establish their status as guards, and they were instructed to disrespect the prisoners and make them feel submissive, helpless, and unheard. All the while, again, reminded they cannot harm them. Sadly, there was actually one guard who ended up striking a prisoner. Now, one example of how they intended on dehumanizing the inmates was they numbered them and called them by a number rather than a name. With no control, the prisoners learned that they had little effect on what happened to them, ultimately causing them to stop responding and simply give up. Now, remember, this was only a 5-day study. They were only 5 days into this study. It was intended to be 2 weeks. By the second day of experiments, the guards were lining the inmates up along a wall. The inmates were wearing identical white prison clothing, and they had these numbers on their chest. Their hair was covered by nylon and cotton bonnets. Again, guards referred to the inmates as an identification number, not by name, and they kept them in those small cells. One morning at 2:30 a.m., the prisoners rebelled against the guards. Again, this was only 5 days. They had this wake-up call of whistles and clanging and batons, and the prisoners just went nuts. They refused to leave their cells, and they refused to eat out in the yard. They ripped off their inmate numbers. They took off their stocking caps, and they started to insult the guards. In response, the guards sprayed fire extinguishers at the prisoners to regain control. Now, the backup guards were also called in to help regain control of the prison, and the guards removed all of the prisoners' clothing, removed their mattresses, and sentenced the main instigators to time in the hole. They attempted to dissuade any further rebellion using psychological warfare. One of the guards said to the other that these are dangerous prisoners. Again, 5 days, this emotional change was going on in not only the inmates, the prisoners, but the guards. At the end of day 3, the guards separated and rewarded prisoners who were considered good, and they gave them back their clothing and their beds. But the bad actors, they were denied food, and after 12 hours, the 3 bad prisoners were sent to their cells without beds. The guards were allowed to abuse their power and humiliate the inmates, including forcing prisoners to do push-ups, work around restricted bathroom use, and so much emotional torture that it actually caused one of the mock inmates to have a nervous breakdown. He was released from the study to avoid any legal action. Now, on the 5th day, the inmates were allowed to see visitors, but they had to wait an incredibly long time to see their loved ones. And those visits ended up getting cut short to about 10 minutes in length. It was on this same day that the independent researcher came into that mock prison and witnessed these atrocities, calling an end to the study. Now remember, the students were paid for this participation, $15 a day. It'd be pretty hefty. They were paid for the full 14 days, even though the study was concluded in 5 days. So they ended up getting $210 each, which doesn't seem like much, but in reality, it's almost $1,500 in today's money. Now, similar studies were later conducted in the UK when 2 psychologists, Alec Haslam and Steve Riker, conducted the BBC prison study in 2002. In that study, guards were not instructed on how to behave, only to figure out how to manage the prison. This time, though, the study was recorded for television, and being watched did change the behavior of the guards. Perhaps much like we're seeing with police body cams now, where law enforcement officers know that those interactions are recorded. Well, I hope you'll take time to watch the documentary. It's called The Stanford Prison Experiment, and you can get the link to it down below, or you'll have them in your syllabus for my students. Hey,
would you rather be a guard or a prisoner?
I don't think I have the qualities to be a guard.
Prisoner.
Prisoner, I guess.
Prisoner. Sounds like it would be a little less work.
Prisoner.
Why's that?
Nobody likes guards.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. This experiment will be an extension of my research into the effects prisons can have on human behavior.
You're going to be pleased to know that you all have been chosen to be the prison guards.
But under no circumstances whatsoever are you to physically assault the prisoners in any way. So remember, just as you were watching the prisoners, my graduate staff and I will be watching you.
All right, gentlemen, we're gonna have ourselves a lot of fun.
Rule number 1, prisoners must remain silent.
This is an exercise period.
Okay, is it just me, or are these guys taking this thing a bit too seriously?
Why don't you give me 20 push-ups?
Look at this guy. Thinks he's John Wayne or something.
You address me as Mr. Correctional Officer.
This might be an interesting 2 weeks after all.
Why don't you make up your bunk, 8612?
I did, Mr. Correctional Officer.
Well, that's not what I see.
Hey, what are you doing? It's just me now!
What was that?
You just hit him. You're not supposed to hit him.
Should we step in?
No. Let the guards figure it out. Let's see where it goes.
Good evening, gentlemen. How about we make this one a night to remember?
This is all real. They won't let you go. They won't let us leave.
Those are not prisoners. Those are not subjects. Those are boys, and you are harming them.
Please! Let me out of here! I want out! I want out now!
You thought you were gonna get some playtime in the yard, boy? Is that what you thought this was gonna be?
Hey, take time to listen carefully to the man who was hired to be the prison guard and tell me if you believe his story. His story was that he only was play acting. He only treated the prison inmates poorly because it was his acting job. You tell me if you think that he's telling the truth and that's really what happened. You know, the subsequent study leaves me with hope that decent people remain decent. In other words, a situation doesn't need to make an individual more prone to aggressive behavior. But I want to know what your thoughts are on this segment, folks. And what are your thoughts on how this particular study was justified? I hope that you'll take a moment and put your notes down below and take time to look at each other's comments and react to them. And folks, please remember to keep your comments high level and respectful. And I hope that you're enjoying this season of Season 3 Profiling Evil Academy, and that you'll take a moment and hit that like and subscribe button and share the Academy with your friends. Your support really is helpful. That way you're going to get notifications on all of our videos. Hey, thanks so much for supporting Profiling Evil, and we'll see you soon at the next crime scene.